This happened a long time ago when I was very young. One day in school, we went on a field trip to a park. I don't remember what park it was or where it was, but I think I was about 7 years old. What I do remember is that at the park, a lot of us were playing around. I think I was playing beanbags with someone else if my memory is correct. I don't recall much about the overall look of the park, but our teacher probably had her hands full being in charge of a bunch of first graders. She was not really close to where I was, and was probably helping some other kids with something. I don't remember any other people being around other than my class and the teacher. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a woman approached me. I couldn't tell where she had come from, but she was calling my name and almost yelling at me. I turned and looked at her and realized that I didn't know who she was. I don't remember what she looked like exactly, but I think she had blonde hair and glasses. She came up to me and said that we had to go, urging me to come with her right away. I asked why I had to go. Even though I was very young, I knew better than to go off with a stranger. I was wondering how she knew my name. Then she mentioned my mom's name and said that it was okay with her. At that point, she had convinced me. I didn't know why or how, but this woman seemed to know me and my mom. She reached out her hand to grab mine, and I started to go with her. But just as we started leaving, I realized that I didn't have my backpack. I had a purple backpack that I loved, and all of my things were inside it. I loved it so much that there was no way I was leaving it behind. I told the woman that I needed to go get my backpack. I let go of her hand and started moving away. I remember her yelling at me, saying we had to go now, but I didn't care. I really wanted my backpack and didn't see why I couldn't just run and get it real quick. My backpack was at a table with some other kids' things, which is where my teacher was. I started running and sprinting towards my backpack. The woman took a few steps after me, but then stopped. After I ran all the way to my backpack and got it, I started heading back towards the woman, but she was gone. I looked around but couldn't find her. Then my teacher asked me where I was going. I told her about the woman, and she asked me where the woman went, but I didn't know. My teacher and I looked around for her briefly, but she was just gone. My teacher then called my mom, who said she had no idea who that woman could be. Not long after, the field trip ended, and we went back to school. I'm really glad that I didn't go with that woman that day. I still don't know who she was or how she knew me, but it really creeps me out knowing that she might have been trying to abduct me. This happened back when I was a kid, around 8 years old, so some of the details are fuzzy, but I remember the basics of what happened. My third grade class was taking a field trip to the zoo. It was nearing the end of the school year, and the weather was finally warm. Everyone was really excited for the field trip. We left the school and rode the bus to the zoo. After we arrived, I remember we started looking at all the animals. The zoo was quite large and had several different areas. We got to split up into different groups that would stay in certain spots, and then, after a while, the groups would move to a different location. It wasn't like we were taking a guided tour. We could wander around a little, but were supposed to stay within our designated area. At least, that's what I remember. As we were walking around, I remember being near the giraffes and looking at them for a while. Then we went into a building where they had lots of fish and reptiles. Each place we stayed in for probably about 30 minutes. Everything was going great, and I was enjoying it. However, when we were in the reptile and fish building, I was looking at one of the fish tanks. It was really dark in that room, and the building had several different areas that were all connected. As I was looking at a big fish, I turned and saw a man standing there who I didn't know. I'm not really sure where he came from, but I remember he was wearing sunglasses. He asked me if I liked the fish, and I said no, then walked away. I wasn't trying to be rude, and I didn't think he was being creepy at the time. I just really didn't like that fish and wanted to get away from it. The man didn't follow me, and soon after, my group left that building. The third spot my group went to was an area with goats and other animals. I don't remember all the different kinds that were there, but they also had a few rides. One was a merry-go-round with horses, and there was also a train that went around the zoo. The train seemed really interesting to me, so I went on it, and it was really cool how it went through the entire park. There was one section that even went through the woods. I went on it with a few other kids, and after the ride, we all got off. I liked it so much, and so did a few other kids, that we went back on it for another ride. I remember sitting by myself in one train car, kind of in the back. We left the station and were going around the zoo. When we got to the wooded section, I specifically remember seeing a man appearing to hide in the woods. He was sort of behind a tree and looked out and saw me. I'm not sure if anybody else noticed him or not. It would have been hard to see unless you looked right in his direction. I also recognized the man as the one who had talked to me, the guy with the sunglasses. I thought it was strange, but soon we had passed him by. I stayed on the train for the rest of the ride, which soon concluded, and returned to the station. After getting off, I remember the teacher in charge of our group called us all together. She said we were leaving, which confused me because we hadn't seen all the animals yet. We were quickly put back on the buses and told we were going back to school. Then I found out that we had to leave because a man had asked one of the kids to leave with him. He tried to get her to go with him, but she declined and reported him. The man then ran off when questioned, so they had to evacuate all the kids from the zoo. That's when I realized it was likely the same man I had seen in the woods. That must have been why he was hiding there. I told the teacher about it, and I guess zoo security was looking for him. We left soon after, and I never found out if they located him. I suppose he could have left through the woods. Looking back, it really creeps me out knowing that the guy tried talking to me. I'm really glad I walked away from him. Maybe he would have tried to kidnap me. Either way, I'm glad he wasn't able to get anyone to go with him, and everyone in my class was all right. Back when I was in high school, we took a field trip to a museum in the city. I was a freshman at the time. Living just outside the city, our school was close by, so it wasn't that far of a trip, but it was still exciting to break away from our usual class routine. The museum we visited was an art museum, and the trip was for the art class I was in. We left school shortly after it started, took a bus into the city, and got dropped off in front of the museum. Upon entering the museum, we had a brief tour from a guide, and then were allowed to walk around freely. Since I was new to the school, having transferred at the start of the year, I didn't have many close friends yet. Most of the kids were nice, but I found myself walking around the museum alone, not really hanging out with anyone. I remember that about an hour into the field trip, I was in one of the rooms of the museum. The room was mostly dark, with only a few other people around. I was looking at some paintings when suddenly I felt a tap on my shoulder. Turning around, I saw a man standing there. He looked to be in his 30s or 40s, and I didn't know who he was. After getting my attention, he greeted me. I was confused as to why he was talking to me since he clearly didn't work at the museum and wasn't part of my class. The guy asked me my name and what I was doing there. He even asked if I had skipped school that day. I told him no, explaining that I was on a field trip. He looked around and noticed a few other people from my class nearby, then started asking more questions about me. I was creeped out by him and tried to end the conversation several times, but he kept talking. Finally, I said I had to go and walked away. He didn't follow me, so I thought I was rid of him. However, sometime later, in a completely different part of the museum, he approached me again. It was the same as before. He greeted me and tried to strike up a conversation. I wanted to walk away, but he kept asking questions. Once more I said I had to go and walked away. This time, though, he started to follow me. He kept walking after me until I got close to my teacher. Then he stayed a distance away. For the rest of the field trip, I made sure to stay near the teacher. The man didn't harass me again, but shortly before we left, I noticed him standing about 50 feet away, just staring at me. It was so creepy that I had to look away. I was relieved when we finally left the museum. After we returned to school and finished the day, I went home. That night I checked Instagram and saw that I had a new follower. When I looked, it was the guy from the museum. He wasn't using his real name, and I can't remember his username, but the picture was definitely him. He then sent me a direct message saying, "Hi." I didn't waste any time and blocked the account, then made my account private. What really creeps me out is that I never told him my last name, and my first name is pretty common, so I don't know how he found my Instagram. Luckily, I never saw or heard from him again after that. This happened when I was about 10 years old. I remember the school I went to was pretty large, and I had many friends there. One day, we went on a field trip to the city to watch a dance performance. It was in a large theater, and there was a dance show on the stage. Our school took several classes, probably over 100 kids. I rode one of the buses with my class to the city, and we were dropped off at the theater. When we went inside, we saw the old and nicely decorated lobby. Then, we were directed to the auditorium, where our teachers told us where to sit. I sat next to my best friend Jake, in the back row on the first level, near the end. Soon, the dance performance started, and we watched it for what felt like a really long time, maybe an hour. Jake and I got kind of bored. I was trying to keep myself from falling asleep since ballet wasn't really my thing. Jake suggested we could get up and walk around for a bit, which seemed like a good idea since we were close to the door and wouldn't disturb anyone. Most people probably wouldn't even notice. So, Jake and I got up and left the auditorium, returning to the lobby area. It was empty, and we walked down a hallway with bathrooms and benches. We then noticed a staircase going up and decided to explore. The stairs led to the second level, which had another lobby leading to the upper deck seats. We explored some more and found cool rooms, including a small area with pictures of past performances. There were also other hallways and rooms with only a few people around. It was more interesting to walk around and explore than to watch the ballet. As we were walking around, I noticed a woman on the second floor. She had shorter blonde hair and was wearing a winter hat. She seemed to follow us. At first, I thought she might work for the theater and that we weren't supposed to be walking around there. I knew she didn't work for our school. Jake and I decided to go back down to the first floor, and the woman followed us but never approached us. Jake went to use the bathroom on the first floor, while I stood in the lobby waiting. The woman was just standing in a corner looking towards me. It seemed strange, but I didn't want to ask her what she was doing. After Jake came out, we sat on a bench in the lobby to talk without having to be quiet. The woman sat in the corner, still looking around. We talked for probably an hour, then decided to return to the performance. When we got up, the woman was still sitting there. I assumed she worked for the theater and thought Jake and I were up to no good. We went back to our seats, and it seemed no one even noticed we had been gone. We watched the rest of the performance, which lasted another 2-3 hours. When it was over, we got up and left with everyone else. The lobby became very crowded as we met with our classes and took attendance before leaving. In the lobby, I noticed the woman looking at me from a distance. It was really weird. We soon left the theater and boarded our bus, which was parked outside. There were about 5 buses in total, parallel parked on the street. After getting on the bus, we didn't leave for at least another 10 minutes, as the teachers made sure everyone was there. When I first got to my seat, I saw the woman walking outside. I figured that was the last I'd see of her. But as we were about to leave, I saw a car pull onto the street behind the buses. The same woman was driving the car. I found it very odd. As our bus left, I noticed the woman driving behind us the entire way back to school. I kept looking back during the bus ride, and she was always there. When we finally made it back to school, she did not turn into the parking lot but kept going. I went back into school, and when the day was over, my mom picked me up. I didn't see the woman again after that day. I'm still really confused about who she was and what she was doing. This happened during my sophomore year in high school. I remember taking an elective class called Outdoor Activities. It was an easy and fun gym class where we went outside and did various activities. Each week we had a different subject, all related to the outdoors. One week we learned how to fish, and another we played tennis. For this particular week, we were going hiking. Earlier in the week, we hiked on a path near the school grounds, and later, we took a field trip to a nearby state park. The park was quite large, with many different trails. Our teacher, Mr. Solari, led the way for the rest of us. The class was not that big, with maybe between 15 and 20 students. On the day of the field trip, we all boarded a school bus for the 20-minute ride to the park. The class period was extended, allowing us to skip the first part of our next class, which I didn't mind since it was math. Upon arriving at the park, we got off the bus and took in the surroundings. There was a lake, a picnic area, and numerous trails leading into a vast wooded area. Mr. Solari started down one of the paths into the woods, walking briskly and making it clear that we were there to hike, not to mess around. I was walking with my good friend Marcus, who was also in the class. Marcus and I were at the very end of the line, moving at a slower pace than the rest. We were engrossed in a conversation about girls, with Marcus giving me advice about a girl I liked. As we continued talking, we lost sight of the rest of the class due to the twists and turns of the wooded path. We didn't mind, knowing we could catch up at any time. Suddenly, we heard a noise to our left, twigs breaking and leaves rustling. We assumed it was a large animal, possibly a deer. Curious, we decided to take a few steps into the woods to investigate. After making our way about 10 feet in, we saw some branches and leaves moving, but couldn't see what caused it. Then, I noticed a man in a brown jacket with a messy beard and long hair. He turned and looked at us, which prompted us to head back to the path. Feeling a bit uneasy, we continued walking, trying to catch up with the class. However, we soon heard more movement in the woods, closer this time. It seemed the man was now making his way toward the path. Ignoring it, we kept walking, but soon realized the man was now on the path, walking behind us at a distance of about 40 or 50 feet. We decided to pick up the pace, hoping to catch up with the group. Despite our faster pace, the man matched it, maintaining the same distance behind us. We reached a point where the path split 3 ways, left, right, and straight. Unsure of which way the class went, we chose to go left. After a short distance, we realized the man had taken the same path and was still following us. At this point, we started jogging. Both of us were athletic and could run for a while, but to our surprise, the man also began to jog after us. It was clear he was chasing us for some reason. Realizing we had likely taken the wrong path and wouldn't catch up with the group, we decided to cut off the path and enter the woods again. We sprinted through the forest, dodging tree branches, with the man still chasing us. Eventually, we reached another path and continued jogging down it for about a minute before leaving it again and entering the woods. We had no plan and were just winging it. After what felt like a long time running through the woods, we emerged into an open area with another picnic spot and some people around. Relieved, we walked towards them. They looked at us strangely, seeing us run out of the woods. But the man did not follow us out. We continued through the picnic area and found another path on the other side. Unsure where to go, we walked along this path until we heard voices up ahead. We saw Mr. Solari and the rest of the class approaching. They looked surprised to see us, but we were extremely happy to see them. Mr. Solari asked where we had been, and we told him the story. He wasn't mad, finding it funny instead, and teased us about it for the rest of the class. I'm really glad we managed to get away from the man. I'm not sure who he was or what he wanted from us. Maybe he was upset that we disturbed him in the woods. Regardless, it was crazy that he was literally running after us. That was my most memorable field trip,